Good evening. This is Ted Hicks, Late Night Parents. Got a really special show tonight, kind of a best of. But before I even get into that, I want to let you know ways to get in contact with the show. It's on Twitter. You can hit us up at Late Night Parent. You can hit me up at The Real Ted Hicks. Our Facebook page is facebook.com/Late Night Parents. Or you can go to our website, latenightparents.com. And for those of you that are lazy, lnp.tv. I do this with the best radio partners in the world. Internet radio rocks. Got to give a big shout out to NGSC Sports, I-95 Sports Network, Life Improvement Radio. One of our biggest partners, UNIR1 Radio. Want a big shout out to Scott Price. FSC Radio in Philly. Want to thank in the UK to Shure. XRP Radio plays us, multiple times during the week. And I would be remiss if I forgot about the home cooking. Happy Hour Network, thank you once again to Mr. Val, Mr. Vandenberg, for what you guys do in airing the show and promoting the show. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Want to let you also know we're on iHeartRadio in collaboration with the Happy Hour Network, in collaboration with Baseball, Beer, and Barbecue, the other show I do. So you can go to iHeartRadio.com, type in Baseball, Beer, and Barbecue. You're going to find the latest and greatest pods from my buddies Lee and Todd and myself as we talk about movies, cinema savants. We talk about Baseball, Beer, and Barbecue, and Late Night Parents. So how do you like that? And soon, hopefully, the Seahawks show, you could find it live on iHeartRadio under that imprint. So, without further ado, this show is called In the Line of Fire. Before I even get into In the Line of Fire, there's so many different things going on. It's 4/20. It's April 20th. Did you vote? If you were in New York, listen to this, in the state of New York, did you vote yesterday? Republicans and Democrats were able to vote, not independents. A lot of stuff going on. The sentencing for the Akai Gurley case, the sentencing that didn't happen. Prayers go out to his family for you losing a loved one. It's that NYPD training. I know a lot of my friends are NYPD and law enforcement, but that's a story within itself. I think next week we have our good friend Sherry Murphy. She's going to talk about Inside the Mind of an Online Predator. We're going to discuss dating sites, do's and don'ts, things you should be looking out for, because I think that hideous situation that just happened, that was just reported about someone being dismembered. Someone met someone on an online dating site. Things went haywire, and the person didn't make it. So we're going to devote some time to our 427 show about it. So I'll guess without further ado, tonight's show is In the Line of Fire. The author of In the Line of Fire, Jan Arnow, is going to join us. Dr. Cleve Bullock is going to join us. And also Professor Kirk Burkhalter, who's also a retired NYPD detective. As I mentioned, this was the best of show that was recorded with Late Night Parents, but we wanted to, piece these three different people together and give you a take on what's going on in society, what's going on nowadays with the violence that's happening out there. We hope you enjoy the show, and we want to thank you for the support.
Today's sponsor is Audible.com, who has more than 180,000 audiobooks and spoken word audio products. Get a free audiobook of your choice at www.audibletrial.com/late-night-parents. Why Audible? Audible content includes more than 180,000 audio programs from the leading audiobook publishers, broadcasters, entertainers, magazine and newspaper publishers, and business information providers. That's audibletrials.com/late-night-parents.
Started reading this, and I want to just read a couple of things to you that you provided to, your readers. There's an overexposure to video games in which the object is to solve conflicts or gain power by using force. I'll read something else. The average child watches 22,000 hours of television by age 18, compared to only 11,000 hours spent in the classroom, according to Nielsen data. And I'll read something on page 3, which says children and teenagers in the United States are 17 times more likely to die from a gun than are their peers in the top 25 other high-income countries combined. Jan, thank you for getting this book. Tell us, why did you write this book?
That's an interesting question. I've been involved in the field of violence by and against children for probably 30 years. And when I go and speak and when I do workshops, the most often heard comment I get is, just tell me what to do. So I did. It's not rocket science. In this book, there are over 400 things that people can do that cost nothing. And the problem, the bad news, of course, is that the problem is enormous. But the good news is that it's so big that everyone has an opportunity to help find a solution. And every one of us can make a huge difference. If we don't do something now, it's moving forward so quickly that we're left behind. If we want to see our children grow up in this culture of violence that we have created for them, they only think they're in charge. And, I've had 3 of my own and I have grandchildren, so I know. And we have a tendency to blame the victim, but it's not their fault. We created this culture of violence. So if we want them to grow up in this culture of violence and then perpetuate it into the next several generations, we should do nothing. If we want to stop it in its tracks, we can do that. And you can see in the book there are hundreds and hundreds of things to do, depending on where your child is, what you're interested in. Nobody has to do everything, but everybody has to do something.
Jan, I can only speak for myself and my wife and our kids, and we try to keep them involved and engaged in extracurricular activities, whether it's with the school, with the church, with a third party function, or somewhere in the community. And I'm not saying that's the recipe for success. I'm not going to say that, but that's what my parents did for me when I was that age. And I'm just thinking, it's just, you have to, just what you said before, you have to be involved.
Yeah, we have to be actual participants in our children's lives because we are their first and best teachers. We can't be on the periphery. We have to be involved. And I'll bet you have open channels of communications with your kids too.
Yes, and that's key. There's certain times when we're sitting at the dinner table, and I hate to sound like we're the Partridge Family or like the Brady Bunch or something, but I'm like, we need to have an open and honest conversation. And I mean, my daughter is 13, my son's going to be 8, and I'm not sure how much longer I'm going to be able to have that relationship, that open and honest with because I know at some point there's a switch, and that switch happens, and the next thing you know, you're like, uh-oh, and then I've lost them for a few years.
I have a theory about that. which is
okay.
When the kids enter puberty, aliens come and take your children away, and they leave these alien kids in their place. And then the trick is, if you don't kill the alien, then you get your own children back at about age 19 or 20.
That's what I was wondering. I want to thank you for that, because I was going to say, when do they come back? When do they say,
they come back?
Dad,
they do.
You know what? They say, you know what, Dad? You made sense. You really, I understood what you were saying. You know, you were pounding my, this knowledge into my head, and I was resisting it, but now I'm ready to take it all in.
Well, I have to tell you, I mean, I'm hearing that now from my kids. They're in their 30s, and my oldest one is 35. He dropped out of high school after 2 years and did drugs for 2 years, and then decided to go back to school, get a GED, aced it, got picked up on scholarship in college. He's now trauma surgeon in New York.
Oh, beautiful.
So beautiful. The point that I'm making here is that we have no throwaway children.
Right.
They are all worth investing in. And
Jan,
nobody said it was going to be easy.
Jan, I know I'm getting a little off topic, but what I feel compelled to share with you. My dad wanted to go. He wanted to go to Foxwoods, and that's the casino in Connecticut. And it was one of those times where I said, "Okay, we'll go. Let's go on a Saturday." And my dad is 83, but so this was some time ago. Let's say this is a few years ago. I'll give it like maybe 10 years ago. And I'm 44, and I said to Dad as we were driving, and I said, "Dad, I just want to let you know something." I was like, "I hear you. All those things that you said to me, I said, I just don't know if I ever really thanked you, but now I get it." Because he would always say to me, when you have kids, this stuff is going to make sense. And I know that's some of the things you've said to your kids.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. And you have no idea how good it feels to hear that from your own children. There's another point that I'd like to make, though, that even if you don't have children, you're still raising them, because every economic decision we make in this country raises children. Every election, every person we elect to office is raising children. So even if you don't have children of your own, it's like the vaccination thing, Don't just do it for your own children. Do it for the other kids who are going to come in contact with other children. We have to be there for our kids. When you said that you were involved in your kids' lives, I think that's extraordinary. One of the most important ways we can be involved in their lives is to be in their school system. The schools are ours.
Yes.
We pay for them. And
totally.
My kids, I've been wearing the same perfume since I was in high school. So, I'm in a little bit of a rut, but all of my kids' friends knew the smell. And when I would come into their school, 3 stories up, I think, some of the kids would say, "Oh, Chloe or Abe or Sam, your mom's here." My kids knew. The kids knew that I wanted to be involved in the school and in their lives. And they were proud. They were really happy that I was doing that. The studies have shown that the more you're involved in your children's lives, especially at school, the better they're going to do, not only in grade-wise, but for the rest of their lives.
So tell me this much. I know from reviewing your book, the intended readership, but I want to ask you this question. You've written 8 books, and I would love to have you back to discuss each and every book. But I want to know, when did you realize you wanted to be a writer?
That's funny. I didn't. Well, no, I can't say that. When I was tiny, I must have been 3 years old, I was at my grandmother's house in Washington, D.C., and all of my other cousins and my siblings were out playing, and I was upstairs in one of her rooms taking apart paper bags and stapling them together. And I couldn't write yet, but I knew my alphabet, so I was putting a letter on every page. That's the earliest that I recall doing anything with books and with writing them. But I did not train as a writer. I trained as a photographer, and all I ever wanted to be was a war photographer. And I've done some of that. But when I started writing, it doesn't stop. I can't think about things to express without putting them in book form, which is a terrible thing these days because people have stopped reading books.
Right.
That we have attention spans that used to be the width and depth of a Cocker Spaniel, and now our attention spans are that of gnats. I know teachers who have to teach in sound bites in order to get their messages across. So,
Jan, I just want to jump in and say, if it's not 140 characters, people don't read.
Mm-hmm. That's right. So maybe my next book I should write on Twitter. What a great idea!
That's a great idea, Hey, and you thought of this idea while you were on Late Night Parents. That's even better.
That's right.
Oh, my
That's
goodness.
right. I'm going to write it down. Next book, Twitter.
Yes.
That is great. What a terrific statement.
Oh my goodness! Hey, I want to know this. I want to know this much from someone who has an extensive writing background. Like, what surprised you about? Let's just take any book. If we just said in the Line of Fire, what surprised you about the process of writing your book?
Surprised me. I think. Okay, I'll tell you. There's whenever I do a book, and I only do nonfiction. I can't write fiction because I can't sit still long enough. You have to be able to sit still and think for long periods of time. And when the kids were little, of course you can't do that. And I never got into the habit of fiction. So all of my nonfiction books are research-based, which means that I have to spend at least a year researching the topics.
Gotcha.
And I think the way I look at it is that it's the cross between a treasure hunt and a jigsaw puzzle. The treasure hunt is finding all the pieces of research, and then the jigsaw puzzle is putting all of that together in a way that someone else can understand it. And sometimes, here's the surprise part, sometimes there are pieces in that puzzle that don't belong. It's like your kid brother threw the pieces in extra from another puzzle. And so you have to have the courage to take some of it out that really doesn't fit and put it in the parking lot for another book or another whatever. That was the surprise.
Wow.
Does that make sense?
Oh, totally.
Oh, good.
I guess that's part of the reason why it takes about a year or so to get your thoughts down, for it to totally not just make sense to you, but to focus on your readers and to get your point across.
Right. This one took 2.5 years from start to finish.
Okay. Wow. So
it's a labor of love, really.
It really is. It really is. I have to say this. I have to ask you this question. So, based on experiences of abuse you had mentioned about with your son, what are some signs that parents and/or adults should be aware of in their children that would indicate possible abuse or that something else is amiss?
Right. Okay. Let's take bullying because bullying is a huge issue, and it happens everywhere. If you think your kid is going to a school where there's no bullying, you're wrong.
Totally.
It happens everywhere, all over the world. The Japanese, in fact, are the worst at it. But these are some symptoms of bullying and abuse, okay? Being frightened of walking to or from school, changing the usual route to school, begging you to drive them to school or not even wanting to go to school, feeling ill in the mornings or those kinds of things, begin to cut school or to hide, Doing poorly in schoolwork, so if you notice that your children's grades are dropping, that's one sign. Becoming withdrawn, starting to stammer, lacking confidence. I've seen a lot of girls in particular who start out as really confident and then they're being bullied or even cyberbullied, and their confidence drops. Attempting suicide, of course. There are many kids who have attempted and who have completed suicide because of bullying. Crying themselves to sleep, having nightmares. Refusing to say what's wrong. And this is where that communication line with your child needs to be open and not just now, not just starting now, you know.
Right.
Refusing, if the child is little, to be washed in the tub or showered by you. This is a big one because if the child has been physically abused, there will be bruises. The child might not want anyone to see those. They might have unexplained cuts or scratches or bruises. Becoming aggressive or unreasonable. Hurting themselves, of course, by cutting or burning or developing eating disorders and feeling helpless and exhibiting low self-esteem. These are all symptoms of bullying and abuse, any one of which could be a signal. And, of course, these and more are listed in the book.
Jan, I just want to piggyback off of that and say, for my church, for the Youth Christian Congress, I did a cyberbullying seminar. And it was just youth from maybe 7, 8 until about, I had a couple of 18-year-olds in there. And I started off by saying, by show of hands, and I want you to show me the device, who has a working cell phone? And for the fact that I saw, I can't tell you how many 7, 8, and 9-year-olds with functioning cell phones. And I said, oh, my goodness.
Yeah.
And it was just, I was just so perplexed by it because we then went into definitions and we had the open conversation. And I said, give me a definition of bullying. Give me a definition of cyberbullying. Is this an example of it? And they were like, well, no. Well, have you ever said to someone or to your friends online if this person was ugly or fat? And they were like, well, yeah, I said that. And I'm like, oh, my.
Yeah. Do you know that every 30 minutes in this country a teenager attempts suicide because of bullying or cyberbullying?
Wow.
And almost 50 kids are bullied every 5 minutes in the United States. And if your listeners would like a sample chapter on bullying, I'd be happy to email it to them. They just have to email me.
Gotcha.
So do you have my email address?
I do have your email address. I want to ask you one more question, and then I know we've taken up a lot of your time.
I'm delighted.
You for being so gracious. I guess my next to last question was, what do you like to do when you're not writing?
I love that question. I like to joke and say my favorite thing to do is lie down, and the second favorite thing to do is lie down and sleep. But I really do like to curl up on the couch and read and knit.
Gotcha.
Very boring things. I garden. This year I'm going to try to grow cotton because I want to be able to spin it and knit with it. Yeah. But I also, I have my artwork, I have my photography, I have all of those things. There is very little time in my life for doing what you might call nothing.
Okay.
I'm pretty busy most of the time, but I love what I do. And this is what I do. I mean, this isn't the sideline. It's like a musician is an actual musician and doesn't have a day job, They're actually playing all the time. Well, this is the kind of work that I do all the time. So it's either writing about it or talking about it or doing workshops on it or being on the radio about it.
Gotcha. Jan, my last question for you is, so what's next for you? Are you working on your next book? Do you have a title for it? Or do you have a subject matter? Yes, and this is something I've been working on for more than 20 years. Before
we had the Internet. So the Internet has made it a lot easier. It's called Voiceless Victims. And the Voiceless Victims refers to children who have been at risk in war and conflict situations. And this is a project. So it includes an exhibition of the artwork and poetry from the Spanish Civil War to the present of children all around the world who have been at risk in conflict and war, and a book and a film highlighting some of those children's lives and the resilience factors, what allowed them to actually grow up and into adulthood. So that's next.
Wow. Jan, I can't thank you enough for coming on just for a few minutes. We definitely want to have you back because you are, like I said, a wealth of information. You are like, a walking, talking encyclopedia, and we appreciate just the time you spent with us. So tell us through social media. Now, I have every way to get in contact with you on social media, and I will make this available in a blog for all of our listeners on Late Night Parents. But
Great.
If you give us your Twitter and Facebook.
Okay.
Give us if we wanted to get in contact with you, what would be the best way?
The best way is email, because I obsessively check my email. And it's JARN as in Nancy OW at IGLOU.com. And if anyone has any questions that they didn't get answered tonight, just email me. And, of course, I'd be happy to send that sample chapter out to anyone.
Gotcha. Well, Jan, we want to give you a round of applause.
That's
you
great.
so much.
I want that. I appreciate this. And thank you so much for asking me to be on the show.
Hey, any given time, if you ever need a platform, you definitely give us a call, or you send me an email, or through Ascot, and I will be sending out the this interview and along with the blog for you for this experience.
Wonderful.
We thank you so much. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks so much. You're welcome.
Bye-bye.
Good night.
And that was Jan Arnow. She, Jan was as advertised. Oh my goodness! So I got to send our good friends at Ascot.
Offering our listeners a free audiobook of your choice and a free 30-day trial membership. Just go to audibletrial.com/late-night-parents and choose from over 180,000 audio programs. Download a title free and start listening. It's that easy. Go to audibletrial.com/late-night-parents. That's audibletrial.com/late-night-parents and get started today. Why Audible? Audible content includes more than 180,000 audio programs from the leading audiobook publishers, broadcasters, entertainers, magazine and newspaper publishers, and business information providers. That's audibletrials.com/late-night-parents.
And I think he just stepped in the room, so we're going to put him on live because Kirk is always early, but I see a 718 number.
That's me, Ted,
excited. Yes. I'm getting excited. It's my brother. Kirk, man, what's going on? So just for everyone to hear, this is Kirk Burkhalter, Professor Kirk Burkhalter, retired detective Kirk Burkhalter, but someone I could say is a friend of mine, and I just want to say thank you for coming on the show, and Kirk, just really in advance, thanking you for, giving us an insight tonight to the topic at hand that we spoke about in depth in front of the law school a few weeks ago. So, Kirk, thank you so much for coming on.
Well, Ted, it is absolutely my pleasure. Like you said, it's always a pleasure to speak with you, and I'm absolutely delighted to be on your show. And I'm glad we can memorialize some of the great conversations you and I have had over the years.
Too many conversations, Kurt.
Exactly.
Oh man. So listen, you and I, we're straight shooters. We've been straight shooters for, I would say, like the last 7 years since we've known each other, and we said we call right is we say what is right and what's wrong is wrong, but something, we were standing outside and we were talking about the situation that happened in Ferguson, and it kind of led me to start thinking about what happened in Staten Island and what's happening across America. Kind of, it's so a one-sided story, or you don't want to say shoot first and ask questions later, but Kurt, what are your thoughts on, some of the happenings that within the last 60 to 90 days dealing with law enforcement?
Well, it's a difficult topic, and it's never ever just cut and dry or black and white. Forgive the pun, of course, and certainly where I teach law students, so I certainly believe in the process. And whenever we talk about criminal law and someone that's formally charged with a crime, I do have a belief in the process. Now, that's a whole other discussion, needless to say, whether or not that's always applied adequately. But that being said, I do believe there's a starting point to this conversation, and it's something that a lot of people don't want to hear, and perhaps, but it is what it is, and to be blunt, African Americans are the ones who are killed by accident. And
right.
There's always a reason, and somebody was reaching for something, and I don't know what's going on with black folks that they're always reaching for something, but yeah, we always reach, but I make light of it, and I don't mean to, but the bottom line, and that's, for me, that's the starting point. There's we can, sometimes we look into these things, we can kind of justify it, but it still doesn't change the fact that when you turn on the news, if someone was killed by accident, or should I say unintentionally, by the police, 9 out of 10 times, or like I always say, arguably 10 out of 10 times, it's going to be an African-American male.
Right.
And I think the gentleman in Staten Island is somewhat of an exception, because it's usually an African-American male that's, somewhere between the ages of 15 and, 28, 30 years old.
Right. Right.
So that's the starting point, and for me. And I have, like I always say, I have a lot of friends who are still active law enforcement. I have a ton of friends that are retired, and I do think certainly it's a difficult job, and it's a thankless job, and so forth. But you have a responsibility.
Kirk, I have to jump in and say,
sure.
You would know best. You would know best.
Well,
you would know best.
I think I know, but trust me when I say I don't know it all. I don't know it all. My father is a retired cop. He was a sergeant, and certainly he provided a lot of mentorship in my career. And when I first joined the police department, I believe it was the day before I entered the police academy. He had some stern words for me. He said, "Hey, you've been a certain person and you've thought a certain way all your life, and that shouldn't change. It really shouldn't change, how you feel about people, how you treat people, and so forth." And that did stick with me. So I do think, and it's somewhat of a radical idea, it's a problem with society, to be quite honest. The police officers are not special people. You don't go to the police officer farm and pick them, and these are special people. They're a reflection of society. And they're a reflection of all the fears and hang-ups and all the other things that we have going on in society. It sounds kind of grim, but I think we can make progress, but I don't think we're really going to change things until society changes its views and comes to terms with some of its fears, to be quite honest.
I mean, you're not painting a picture that's total doom and gloom. You're telling us what's really happening out there, because, I'm at a point where my son is only 7, but at a certain point in time, we teach him now on how to conduct himself when he's not around us, when he's in the public. But as he gets a little bit older, there's going to come a point in time when another conversation needs to take place. When he starts driving, or when he hits the point where he's an adult.
Well, I would dare to say, as an African American parent, you're almost being irresponsible if you don't have that conversation with him.
Correct.
Yeah.
Because Kirk, I'm sitting here, and because I know, like my father before me pulled me to the side and said, okay, so here's a few things that are going to happen. And he wasn't in law enforcement. He was a transit, a motorman for the transit authority. And he said, here's how it is out in life. Out in life, here's what you're going to have to deal with. And, he told the truth. But it's like from you, I want to hear from you because you have a son that's of age and, college grad. And, I know you're very proud of him. But, with being out in the real world and driving behind driving an automobile and, you giving him nuggets on, not to drink and drive and using his best judgment. But so what happens when someone that's African American or Latino or a white American is pulled over by an officer or state trooper? Like, what are some of the best practices? Like, what should that person be looking for?
Well, I think it's all about your safety, meaning the civilian safety. And also keep in mind, and in all fairness, some of it is about the police officer's safety. Now, whether his or her fears are well-founded or not well-founded, that really doesn't matter if both of you are on the street at that time. That's a discussion for another day once the two of you are out of that situation. But you have to remember also that police officers do want to protect themselves. They see more violence and so forth than the average person. So they do want to protect themselves. But you also want to protect yourself. And, given the statistics and so forth, and, my son is 25 now, and, thank God he's a great guy. He's a great person. But, he never got involved in things. I tell him the same thing. So it's about your safety. So first and foremost, you have to comply. You have to follow instructions. You're never, ever going to talk your way out of anything. And that's just a fact. It's a reality that you have to accept. Generally speaking, you have to comply with instructions. If a police officer asks you for some identification or pull the car over, you kind of engaging in a verbal confrontation is never going to help the situation. No police officer is going to back down because you started yelling at him or her. So that's the first thing. You want to comply. You want to be civil. You want to just be civil, right? They're asking for your identification, whatever the case, provide it to them. I always recommend, if you're pulled over, especially if it's at night, turn on the interior lights of your car and keep your hands on the steering wheel. So this way, God forbid, you're not reaching for anything. But, that's helpful. It helps to put that person at ease.
Right.
So those are two very important things. And like I said, remember that it's about your safety. Finally, not finally, but one of the more important things and something to remember, if for whatever reason the police officer feels that you need to be arrested, you need to be handcuffed and taken to the station, you have to go. You have to comply. You're not going to talk your way out of that. You're not going to fight your way out of that. And as a matter of fact, the more resistance you give, the more likelihood that there'll be some type of physical altercation. And that's why we have a legal system. That's why I teach law students, because once you get to wherever you're going, you have the right to an attorney. You can contact an attorney. We do have a constitution. We have certain, there are certain protections for folks. It's an uncomfortable situation to be handcuffed and taken to the precinct, but if that's going to happen, you have to realize that there's nothing you can do at that point to get out of that situation. So you have to stay cool, and once you get there, you're able to make a phone call, and you call an attorney. And I don't care, what the situation is, other than some basic information, your name and your address and so forth, you don't have to talk until you consult with an attorney. And I recommend that you don't, because 9 out of 10 times, you're probably just kind of talking yourself into more trouble. So, if the police have probable cause to arrest you, they have probable cause. The wheels of justice have started. So at that point, you should always consult with an attorney. Informing, and these are not my words. I wish I could credit the party where I heard it, but you don't explain your rights. You demonstrate that you know your rights. So you never have to tell the police, I have the right to this, I have the right to that. You demonstrate that you know your rights by doing certain things. For instance, like I always say, may I search your trunk? No, you may not. If someone asks, if the police come to your house and ask you, may I search your house? Well, clearly, if they had a search warrant or they had probable cause, or one of the exceptions with probable cause to search your home or your car, they wouldn't ask you. So, I'd like to talk to my lawyer first. I'd like to know why you want to search this, But no, absolutely not, absolutely not. But the key is really remaining cool and not. It takes two parties for an argument, or most times it takes two parties to escalate a situation. So no matter how out of control things seem to get, if you comply and you remain cool, there is a good chance that things can be worked out. Because really, Ted, what we're talking about is surviving a confrontation without incurring any type of injury, without making the day worse,
I mean, you're already in a situation. The last thing you want to do is make it worse.
Absolutely.
It's you know what? It's so sad, Kirk, because we sit back and in our passings, and we'll talk about whatever the latest situation is or whatever happened, and overall we'll sit there and say it didn't have to happen that way. Or, it's always the aftermath of the specific situation. But cooler heads do prevail.
They do prevail. They do prevail. And I hope anyone who's listening by no means takes what I say to mean that it's ever the victim's fault if something unfolds and the victim is hurt, or these folks that who suffer injuries or death at the hands of police brutality. It's not their fault. The police have a responsibility to act professionally, period. And it's the job of the police officer to deliver the person to the court, right? The police officer is not the judge and jury, so it's their responsibility to act professionally. So it's never the victim's fault. However, with everything in life, we can always learn, and we can learn. We've all done things, and we've all said, the next time that happens, how can I do it better? How can I protect myself better? And the key is to protect yourself. I always tell folks when I do these talks, you don't want your kid's picture on a T-shirt. You don't want a case named after your kid. You don't want your kid to be the test bubble for one of these incidents. And that's the reality. You want your kid to come home. And that's at the end of the day, that's all you want. And for adults too, we want to go home.
Today's sponsor is Audible.com, who has more than 180,000 audiobooks and spoken word audio products. Get a free audiobook of your choice at www.audibletrial.com/late-night-parents. Why Audible? Audible content includes more than 180,000 audio programs from the leading audiobook publishers, broadcasters, entertainers, magazine and newspaper publishers, and business information providers. That's audibletrials.com/late-night-parents.
We discuss what's going on in the schools today, these tragic school shootings that seem to happen time and time again, and we have to look at this violence that has plagued our educational system. So without further ado, we'll bring on our first featured guest. Dr. Cleet, how you doing, sir?
Hey, I'm doing just fantastic here in Georgia today. Sun's shining, beautiful day.
Oh, that's wonderful. That's wonderful. A little bit cooler in New York, but
yep, I imagine.
I'll take it. I'll take it. So, Dr. Cleet, we'll get right into it. We have a problem going on nowadays because I work at a higher educational institution. The one thing I do note is the amount of shootings that have taken place just in this calendar year. That's one option. Number two is just the amount of threats or the amount of times that some type of malicious activity has taken place in a higher educational institution. And that's well over 50 or 60 times just this calendar year. I mean, it's making a great deal of money for emergency notification systems. I mean, companies that push that model. But what's going on in the world today?
we have, all people have 5 basic needs. You have 5 basic needs. I have. Every kid has. Everyone listening has the same 5 basic needs. Now, and here they are. Number 1, and this is not new. Maslow's hierarchy of needs, he's identified his 5 needs. Philosophers from centuries back, going back into the 1800s, have tried to figure out, why do people behave the way they do? That's been the question. And, of course, violence in the schools, why do people do that? And you talk about shooters, move it on down a little bit, there are bullies. A shooter is the worst kind of bully, but they are a bully, and they shoot people for the same reason that bullies victimize people. It all boils down to the 5 basic needs, and here they are. Number 1, life. Most people want to be alive. They want to survive, right?
Correct.
Yeah, except for the Islamic people who blow themselves up, but they have a different purpose. They believe that they are going to heaven and they will have their eternal reward. So life to them doesn't have the meaning that it has to most Christians or most Americans in our society. So most people want to be alive. That's number 1. Number 2, most people want moments of happiness, right? There are times, if you were never happy, that would not be a very good life, right?
Not at all.
Okay, so that's the second reason. Most people want moments of happiness. Number 3, control. And that's been talked about going back to Nietzsche in the late 1900, who spoke of power and control. Most people want to have some form of power so they can have some control over what happens in their life. Ted, for example, when you're totally out of control, how do you feel?
I would say I'm not feeling at my best.
No.
If I'm totally not in control, it's a little hazy.
Yeah, but on the other extreme, when you have control of what's happening, like you and I right now, we have control, right?
Correct.
So that is a good feeling. A shooter normally does not. They believe they've lost control, and you can look at all of the shooters. The Colorado shooter, the Oregon shooter, the Connecticut shooter who went into the school and shot all those kids in that elementary school. All of those people believed they had lost control. Take the Connecticut shooter, for example. His mom is going to send him away to a institution because she can no longer control him. So he is going to lose control of his life. So when you get a gun and you've got a gun in your hand and your finger on the trigger, you have control. Gives them control. So that's the third basic need. And you look at anything that's happening in the world today. You look at the bombings in Paris. That's all about control. Those people, those terrorists, they wanted to control what was happening in that theater, the concert hall, and the restaurant. It's all about control. You look at what's happening in the Middle East with the terrorists and the countries going in there and us with our planes and the bombs. It's all about control. You look at what's happening in Congress today with our president and the House of Representatives and the Senate. It's a big control thing. You agree with all that? All of life is a struggle about control. That's my opinion. What are your thoughts on that, Ted? Hello?
Yes, Clete, I'm here. I'm sorry, I had you on mute. I just wanted to make sure it was coming through as clear as possible.
Oh, well, I've got the speaker on. Is it better if I turn it off?
Oh, no. This is perfect. This was on my end. I wanted to make sure you were coming through as clear as possible.
Well, we talked about, I said all of life is about control. You look at what's happening in the Middle East, you look at what's happening with Congress, the president and Congress, it's all about control. And you look at the debates. Each candidate speaking is trying to control what happens so they come out on top. Isn't that
correct?
What you see as well?
Correct.
Okay.
That is.
The third basic need is control, and that's the big one when it comes to violence in our schools. The shooter or the bully is taking control back. For some reason in their life, they've lost control, and they feel like they have to get control back. And when you put a gun in their hand and put their finger on the trigger, they are in control. And that's sad, but that is true. That's the third basic need. Here's the fourth basic need. Caring. Everybody listening out there needs to feel like somebody cares about them as a person. That is a basic need, to know that somebody cares about you. If you woke up one morning and realized that nobody cares about you, and you know, when I think of Jackson dying with all that money and all the singing that he, I believe he thought that the only reason people liked him was because of his money. I don't think he believed that people cared about him as a person. And that's why he went to the drugs. Drugs, when people are not in control, and he had some control issues, but drugs was his way to get control back. And he didn't believe people cared about him. And the shooters, the violence that's going on in our schools, you take that kid in Connecticut who went into the elementary school. He believed his mom didn't care about him anymore. You take the Oregon shooter, he couldn't get a girlfriend. You take these people going from the United States into ISIS and becoming those soldiers over there, one of the things they're promised is a wife. Because most of these people going over there, they don't have girlfriends. They don't have a reason for life here in the United States. They've lost their purpose here in the U.S. So they go over there and become ISIS soldiers because they're promised a wife, they're promised money, they're promised a purpose. And that's the fifth reason for why people behave the way they do, purpose. And I'm not alone in saying this. Dr. Mehmet Oz, Dr. Rick Warren, the Dalai Lama, they all state that life with no purpose is no life. So you put that mixture together, purpose, caring, control, happiness, and if you have a person who is not happy at times, has no control, has no purpose, and believes nobody cares about them, their life isn't worth living. So they're going to do something. They're going to become a homeless person. They're going to go to drugs. They're going to go to alcohol, or they're going to get a gun, and they're going to shoot somebody, or they're going to commit suicide. And that's the basic thing. Now, relating that to our schools, and I've done research on hundreds of schools, and I've got the documentation. It's on my website. It's documented in my book. There are many kids who go to school with no purpose. And I interviewed thousands of students when I had the contract to evaluate the entire state of West Virginia. I said, why do you go to school? And they said, well, we have to. I said, you don't have any other reason for going to school? Nah. If I didn't have to go, I wouldn't go. I don't like school. I hate school. So kids go to school because they have to. They have no reason for going, about 50% of them. And they go to school believing the other kids don't care about them. They believe the teachers don't care about them. And I have that data. I've surveyed students on caring behaviors, and they state 50% of them believe the teachers don't care about them. So they have no purpose, believe the teachers don't care, believe the other kids don't care. They are not happy, and they have no control in school because they have to study what they're told to study. They have to obey the rules or get sent to the office. So you got kids going to school, 50%, have no purpose, have no control, believe nobody cares, and they're not happy. How are they going to learn?
It's true.
Now you have the other 50%.
Okay.
Who are succeeding in school because they're there to get the grades and they're getting them. The teachers like them, and they're in control, and they have a purpose. They know that good grades are going to get them something, and they succeed. But the other 50% do not. The latest report out of the federal departments, with the resignation of Arnow Duncan, the secretary, shows that over the past 8 years, there's been no progress made on test scores. The focus has been on test scores. There's been no improvement on test scores, despite millions and millions of dollars the feds have doled out in Race to the Top. There has been no improvement because that's what the book has written. That's why I wrote the book. There are 6 reasons for low test scores. Number 1 is the 5 basic needs of kids and teachers are not being met. There are many teachers who are frustrated because they are totally controlled by central office. They are told what to teach. They are told what tests are going to be given. They have to teach to the test. They're not happy. They can't control the students, so they're not in control of the classroom. And it's just a nightmare out there. If you just think about it, for the last, going back to Bush and before Bush, they've been trying to improve schools out of the Federal Department of Education, and nothing has worked. Nothing has worked.
Dr. Cleet, I want to jump in here and say 2 things.
Go ahead.
One, Rick Warren's book, A Purpose-Driven Life, a must-read. A must-read.
Yes.
And number 2, I was going to say to you, in regards to low test scores, in regards to trying to fix education, does excuse me 1 second, does Common Core help or hurt the situation?
Hurts. And here's the reason why. Almost all the stuff coming out of the feds deals with curriculum, with what teachers teach. Trying to control what teachers teach. The Common Core gives everybody in the United States a Common Core. Well, in Alaska, what's important in Alaska is not what's important in Florida or in New York City or in Atlanta. What's important in the city schools in Atlanta is not what's important in Peachtree City, one of the wealthiest school districts in the state in terms of the salaries of the people who live in that community. Peachtree City is where all the airport pilots live. They're very, very wealthy. Common Core for them versus Common Core for the city of Atlanta versus Alaska. Why have a Common Core? You know, every community should have a different curriculum based on what's important in that area. Common Core is a disaster. The feds try to improve schools by focusing on curriculum. Here's the 6 reasons why that will not work. Number 1, the school climate in most schools is not good. In the state of Georgia, they surveyed 2,600 schools in the state of Georgia on climate, and only 10% had a really good climate. 10%. Well, you know, when you walk into a school and the people don't get along and don't feel good about what's going on in that school, how are you going to get good test scores out of that? Number 2, the 5 basic needs aren't being met. Number 3, power and control. There's an overemphasis on control in schools. When people when people try to control you, Ted, do you resist?
Of course you do.
It's a natural human tendency. The more people try to control you, you resist. Well, if you have discipline problems in a school, the teachers have to control more and more and more and more. The administration has to control more and more and more. And the more you control, the bigger the problem gets. That's one of the problems. Now, in my book, our book, we talk about how to give control to people without giving it up, because if you're a school principal or a teacher, you cannot give up control. But you have to give control to the kids without giving it up. There are a number of techniques you can do to do that, and we probably don't have time to get into that here, but if you want to talk about how do you give control to people without giving it up, we can do that.
Oh, no, Dr. Cleet, go ahead. Go right ahead. We have a few minutes.
Well, the fourth reason for low test scores is levels of openness and trust. Teachers don't trust administrators. Teachers don't trust each other. They are not open with each other. They're afraid to say things because it'll come back to haunt them. So levels of openness and trust are not what they ought to be, and I've got the data to prove that. And just think for a minute, Ted. Are you married?
Yes, I am.
Okay. What happens in your relationship with your wife if you don't trust each other?
It goes south.
If you're not open with each other and don't trust each other, the relationship goes south. Well, that's what's going. I've got the data on 11 variables in schools. Levels of openness and trust are always the two lowest variables. And then the other reason is the way parents are involved. Parents tend to be involved in elementary schools, but when you get to middle and high schools, they're shut out. The parents don't feel comfortable in those settings, so they're shut out. Well, you get the kids for 6 hours a day, 180 days a year, and then they go home for the other 18 hours and in the community for the other 18 hours. There's no reinforcement of what happens in the schools in those other 18 hours a day or those other 180 days a year. There's no reinforcement, and that's another big problem. How do you get the parents involved? Because one of the biggest problems with many schools is the parents. The parents at home are not good citizens. You know, they're on welfare. They're single-parent families. They are not good role models for their kids. And we're talking, roughly, 30 or 40% of these parents who need help. They need to be educated in their own way. Chapter 5 in the book shows how to do that with a character education program that involves parents in the community. Right now, when I interviewed the teachers in West Virginia, I said, "What do you like about your schools?" And they said, "The parents." And I said, "What don't you like about them?" They said, "The parents." I said, "Whoa, wait a minute." They said, "Well, the parents, many of these parents undo everything we try to get these kids to do when they go home." So you've got to involve the parents in a meaningful way in the schools if you're going to significantly impact the behavior of the students. Now, I'm talking about behavior. I'm not talking about test scores. The behavior of the kids when they come into these classrooms, the teacher is up there. "Sit down, be quiet, give me that note. Where's your homework? Where's your book?" And on with behavior. That's one of the biggest problems with our schools today. The time lost to the instructional process because teachers have to correct the misbehavior of students. That is number one. I'd say 30 days a year of instruction are lost because teachers have to stop teaching to correct kids. On an average hourly day classroom, teachers have to stop 5 to 10 times every class period to correct misbehavior in the classroom. That's time lost. Where do you want to go from here, Ted?
Unbelievable. We're gonna wrap this up right now because I think we're gonna need to have you come back for a one-on-one where we can have a little bit more time because we have another guest in the queue. Dr. Cleet, want to thank you, and for the most part,
give the listeners my website if they want to look up any of the other stuff I've been talking about. www. Do you have it?
Oh yes, I have it. But you go right ahead. Go right ahead.
Okay, it's WestGA, West Georgia, WestGA abbreviated .edu / tilde, that little squiggly up in the left-hand corner of the keyboard, and C Bulach, BULACH, and all your stuff will come up.
That's wonderful. We're going to post it on the Late Night Parents site. Want to say thank you. Also, where can we get your book?
Oh, it's on my website or Amazon.com. Put in the last name, Bulach, and culture, school culture, climate, and it should come up.
Got you. Dr. Cleet, thanks so much. We want to definitely have you back in the near future. Thanks for taking the time today.
I appreciate it, Ted, and good luck to your brother.
All right. Thanks again.